All right, I am on theme. Dropping the last episode temporarily. I'll get back to it. So I want to talk about Tolstoy. Leo Tolstoy is, I regard, one of the most underappreciated theorists that there is. That's a pretty general sort of statement, but because by theorist, obviously I just mean what the fuck does that mean? It was any kind of scientifically minded guy or anything. I mean, he was essentially a theologian. So obviously, Tolstoy is one of the most obvious fucking ever greatest artists of literature. The most obvious take that everyone knows is one of the great novelists. Everyone's heard of War and Peace. But a little more than that, he's one of the best fucking short story writers. He had a shit ton of short stories. A lot of them are really, really good. But then I think he's actually also really good as a theorist, as just a different kind of thing, as a kind of analytical thinker who's working through concepts effectively in a in a coherent manner with a good direction. He was a big theorist of Christianity. In his later life, he wrote a lot of sort of essay kind of things about his worldview and working things out, and it informed his writing a lot. There was an interesting feedback loop there. But anyway, most of his sort of essays and thinking and such, and later short stories especially, are all sort of about explicitly thinking through Christianity, and he's great at that. But actually, I want to fucking trail off of his book, What is Art? Because Tolstoy wrote a book, What is Art? And his take on what is art is kind of perfect, to be honest. Kind of just the right take, the end. It doesn't seem that way because he himself draws farcical conclusions from his own expression of what is art when he arrives at it. But I think with one addendum, which is pretty crucial, his theory does not imply his own conclusions, and then his theory is actually incredible. So Tolstoy, it's a whole book. This isn't an essay. It's a long enough thing. Tolstoy works through different ideas about what art is, and he sort of tackles all the different ways of putting it. And what he arrives at, that what art is straightforwardly just essentially it's just a way of communicating emotions. It's a way of collecting, in the production of the art, it's a way of collecting emotions and rendering them into some sort of communicable form that's distinct from, deeper than mere linguistic communication, mere enunciation. And it's the communication of feelings. But then part of what is art is about what is good art, what is bad art. That's bound up within what is art. And what he arrives at there is that the only appropriate thing, ultimately, the only really meaningful thing at all, to talk about with regard to good art is to straightforwardly remain committed to good as simply meaning good. To good as meaning like righteous rather than like impressive. And what this means is that he says ultimately that good art is art that like communicates feelings in such a way that forms like the one who partakes in the art to themselves be good, that like causes them to be good. It just spreads good. That's what good art is. It's art that does good. And bad art is art that does bad. And I think thinking through this is completely right. This is like unambiguously correct. But it's not really a popular way of thinking today. It didn't exactly catch on, and Tolstoy didn't exactly help, because he concluded, based on his own assessment, a lot of weird, funky things about good art and bad art. Because he had this sort of idea of good art is art that does good. So it's like some sort of set of produced experience that communicates feelings in some way that forms good. It's like directs you to be good, act goodly. But he had this is the problem. He had a fairly sort of silly, naive conception of, in this theory anyway, of what it means to make someone good or bad, or direct them to do good or bad. He basically just says that, like, a story just like shows like good people doing good things, that like, you know, like a kid's story, that like there's just an obvious moral of the story, that like the guy who did the good thing got the happy ever after. That's like good. And then the bad people doing terrible things and the world is terrible, that's like bad. That's a bit silly, but kind of that is what he's saying, because he disregards his own corpus as bad art. He disregards, I believe, Shakespeare largely as bad art. He disregards all the most good ever art as bad art. And this is why it's not taken super seriously as an idea. Because, like, who fucking cares about any of these ideas or concepts or words? If we arrive at the conclusion that, like, I mean, hell, that Tolstoy is bad art. If we arrive at the conclusion that War and Peace is bad art, you know, something went wrong there. I don't need to know what exactly. Clearly something went wrong. And this is sort of the takeaway. But, what did go wrong was his failure to appreciate psychoanalysis, essentially. So yes, I'm going to go into that, and basically my take today is just that, like, Tolstoy was completely right, but he's like hadn't read Freud. Oh, what an idiot! Why didn't he read Freud? Get a time machine. So basically, this is my theory on art. Is that art is just what Tolstoy said. It's just this form of like produced works that communicate feelings in this distinct way. And so what art does is it affects people throughout the world by spreading these feelings. And the effect of art is ultimately good or bad. It is ultimately like directing the development of characters in such a way that is like pushing history this or that direction. And ultimately that's good or bad. But Tolstoy just did not really work through some sort of implicit components of that process. So there's some extra keys that have to be understood for this whole thing to unlock and be clear. So one thing is just how art affects you, how you are affected by art, the nature of that. And that's where psychoanalysis is absolutely essential. In a pretty simple way, like I don't need to go into fucking Oedipus or something. But I want to talk about that. And then the other big thing, so built on top of how art affects you, is how you are formed to be more good. How you become good. What that actually consists of. That's because that's not necessarily simple. Okay, so how art affects you. Firstly, and this is just to sort of, just like say out loud, I think something which is honestly pretty obvious. Which isn't a psychoanalytic point, but I don't think you need to like be immersed in psychoanalysis to like appreciate this. It's just that art affects you, in a lot of unconscious ways. Because what it is communication of feelings. It's not the communication of just like a logically structured argument. So art doesn't affect you in terms of like, this is the moral of the story intended by the writer, or even like this is clearly the ultimate moral of the story, like not intended by the writer, but just like, this is like the rational conclusion of the events of the plot or something. It's just generally not that straightforward. How art affects you is that you, if you seriously engage with it, you just sort of automatically employ a kind of parasocial, like symbiotic alignment with the process of living through like the story conveyed, or like being within like the environment conveyed, like say if it's a painting, or just like you're just like forced to confront a part of yourself that resonates with whatever it is. If it's a bit more abstract, if it's fucking Rothko or something, like like just for art generally, how art affects you is it's not an argument. It's not a matter of like, this is what my story is about. Therefore, cause like Harry in the story was like a good little boy and was very brave, you should be brave. No. How it works is like, by spending a lot of time with Harry and relating to or not relating to the manner in which his bravery was conveyed in relation to the conditions in which he found himself, you sort of just achieve a resonance with how you would relate to those conditions, or what it is about him that you like aspire toward, or what it is about him that might disgust you, that you don't actually regard as aspirational, and you just sort of develop your own interpersonal judgment of him as a general character in relation to all the other characters that he's interrelating with. And all of this stuff, for some people, it might be like, I like Harry, Harry was brave, I want to be brave. But for some people, it might be like, Harry was a bit of a fucking gobshite, actually, to be honest. Like, I can see how, within the extremely contrived plot, it was supposedly the case that he was very brave. But honestly, the character portrayed by his sort of acts and decisions, if you just put it in a different set of circumstances, I think was kind of retarded. That might be your takeaway. And just to double down on the unconscious element, if that sounded a bit too like some kind of conclusion-y, your takeaway could also just be like, I don't know what it is about Harry, but he just like, he makes me feel like kind of lazy. I don't know. There's something about the manner in which he travels through his events that just is very demotivating to me. Like, that could be as clear as you can get. So art is the communication of feelings, but the whole point is the feelings communicated by art are, this is what makes art art. The feelings communicated by art are precisely that which just standard communication is not up to the task of conveying, like art can. So it's just sort of getting at your unconscious, like kind of directly. Because what your unconscious is kind of your local real, like your sort of directly imminent, inescapable reality that is like beneath and beyond you, your character, your conscious appreciation of things. And the unconscious is like formed by like everything you internalize and the manner in which you presume and you act, like, is that which goes without saying for you. And so art gets to you on that level. And it might be, for some kind of great auteur, that like they have a specific sort of message or moral or theme in mind, and it just like does get across according to like they very reliably grasp the manner in which like affect really occurs through the styles they operate, and through the structure they follow. Or it could just be like, you know, this is just the fucking way it works out. Okay, so how does art affect you? Art just sort of like impresses upon you affectation in such a way that is formative of you. It's not a matter of information that is input to you. And so to sort of scale that up a little, how does art affect us in a bigger way? Like what is art doing to humanity? And how I would put that is that what art is doing, like structurally at scale through this kind of affectation, is that art really is colonizing the minds of humanity from the future. This is just the nature of art, actually. And obviously, this is kind of the limit of what art can do, which is just to say, great art does this clearly, pretty good art does this somewhat, and terrible stinky shart art like pretty much does the opposite of this actually, but like does so in such a way that resonates with the form of this occurring. And so what that means is just it's to do with what art is, how art is formed, because it's wholly intuitive, it's wholly creative and expressive and chaotic. It's exploratory. What you are doing in making art is just sort of wandering out in luxury into nonsense, like leaving behind that which is like thoroughly settled and like diving into the ineffable. And then you are forming order out of chaos. You're taking the first step from nothing toward like total knowledge. This is what you're doing every time in the creative moment of making art. And so it's wholly intuitive. It's wholly like being guided by this unspeakable sense of necessity just pulling you in some way. And the thing is about this, because what you're doing is you're just sort of following your intuition into madness, really, into the unspeakable. And then you're just forming something out of that and bringing it back into the land of order, back into the land of like rationally dominated clarity. If you're really fucking great at that, you know, if you happen to be Shakespeare, what your intuition strikes upon is something so deeply resonant, something so within the very core of the human experience of your time, that you just you strike upon a sense according to which history itself is genuinely moving. And you strike upon something that conveys what it is that will resonate with the future about your time. Like how it is that someone can appreciate the ultimate unity of humanity between like having your mind entirely formed by this time, like by like feudal like city-state relations or something, with like the fucking information age, like the dawn of AI, cybernetic madness. You know, Shakespeare basically completely clarifies the modes of character motivation and an internalized like rationalization and development that like very much operates today. And it's not just that he's like such a genius psychologist that he's like hitting upon something that's just like across the board true of humanity for all time. It's actually like more profound than that. It's actually that he is hitting upon a depth of psychology that really cannot be said to be universal in the human, and cannot be said to be normal in his own time. He's hitting upon a depth of psychology of really of the modern and even postmodern man, of like man as abstracted from man and like fallen into the bourgeois like total civil society. He's conveying a character that is thoroughly alienated in a way that's actually like not necessarily true of like a lot of people at his own time. Like, and it's not just a matter of some people are a bit more melancholy and he's just focusing on them. Like it's like it's like genuinely this this terrifying, overbearing, undermining level of alienation that I think today is relatively common. It's like it doesn't take intellectual prowess to be stuck within this kind of conceptual slavery. But then was sort of strange. So that was I just wandered into a specific example. But the point is, what art does is it through the artist captures some sort of echo of the necessity that goes beyond your time and endures unto the future, and conveys that in a form that is clearly sort of, it's like tangible and yet unspeakable. So this is like a little scaled up, a little more crazily, a little more ambitiously what art does. And so to back up to this sort of the different sort of levels of this going on, like great art just straightforwardly colonizes humanity from the future, and like Dante just conveys such a profound, like all-encompassing degree of like individually captured structural totality that he captures the kind of ideologically ridden and like worldly like groundedness of the modern man, and just like presents it to the medieval man who's just like, what the fuck, I was barely understanding these crops. Dante pulls this off, which is nuts. Then like middle ground, a somewhat good example of art is like man, I'm sitting here losing my mind trying to come up with a determinately sort of middling to pretty good example of art. And it's hard to be certain about a thing like that, because the degree to which I'm certain usually sort of comes along with like the passion of this is great or terrible. But I don't know, you get the idea. A guy that doesn't achieve like the absolute ridiculous level of Dante, but is like, I sort of saw 10 years down the line coming that this sort of captures. And then terrible art is like, it's sort of it echoes the form of this like this psychological capture and this emotional capture from the future, but it deploys in content a kind of reactionary mechanism, which, off the top of my head, an example of like 30 failed art in that manner is like fucking Devil May Cry 2. They're just like, man, that was the wrong direction. Because like Devil May Cry 1 was this like just radically creative sort of anti-horror strange game where you're like caught in this overbearing, like gothically drenched, foreboding nature, but it's a sublime power fantasy wherein you're conquering these horrors. And then Devil May Cry 2, but you know, the point of that is like, it's like important to the aesthetic form of Devil May Cry that it's hard. Is what I'm getting at there. And Devil May Cry 2 is so fucking easy that it just fucking sucks. That's a really hilarious, shitty little review in the middle of all this. But that's my example of dog shit art, because it's like conveying feelings of like being within this like horror aesthetic and being like conquering it or whatever, but because it just fails to capture the kind of the necessary core of you actually like actively do the conquering because it's crazy hard. Instead, it's just like recapturing the minds of the players from like the fucking older genre of just like power fantasy, just like sort of action adventure shit. It's sort of hilarious. But anyway, that's a massive spiral tangent. All of this was just saying, what does art do? What art does is it colonizes the mind from the future. And that's just the grand, mad sort of following on of saying, what does art do? Art strikes you at the level beneath your consciousness and forms you at the level beneath your consciousness. This is what art does to you. Okay, so back way the fuck up. And then I can work on tying them together. Because what this was about, I was talking about what art is and what art does, including what is good and bad art. And I'm agreeing with Tolstoy that good art is not like successfully stylistic art. It's like good forming art. And bad art is bad forming art, as in evil forming art. So, how does good actually operate in the formation and the change and the development in the world? So right off the bat, I'm kind of like agnostic about the possibility of really effectively theorizing ethics. I kind of think necessarily it just is a matter of just like imminent intuitive knowledge. Like it's a matter of like revelation, like ethics, like good and evil. You just like know deeper than you can express that this is right, this is wrong. That's like how it functions. I mean, nonetheless, you know, we can sort of talk about it, but I don't think you're ever going to have like a general sort of theory, which is like just generally the way, you know, like, so like deontology is not right, and like consequentialism is not right, and like nothing fucking else ever is going to be like just straightforwardly it exactly in any kind of abstract manner like that. Because it's so subconscious, it's so like beneath. It's very much, you know, and you see it. But what I will say is that how good operates, how good and evil work in the world is definitely, what you can say theoretically is definitely like, it is not a matter of just like good and evil persons. That's really fucking obvious. And that's almost like not even a theoretical statement about ethics or morality or whatever, because that's, you know, that's just true of absolutely everything ever. Like that's just part of like the dialectical worldview. There's no like essentially static anything, so certainly not people, like certainly not fucking characters, like the most complex entity in the universe. So how do good and evil sort of work? Well, it necessarily is sort of, you're talking about like, how does freedom work? Because for there to be good and for there to be evil, there has to be freedom. I wouldn't necessarily say choice. I think that has bad connotations, bad sort of metaphysics attached to it. But there has to be freedom. There has to be like direction from the will of the happening of reality. It's not exactly choice, because choice implies a kind of particular moment too much. It kind of implies that like you're presented with these like isolatable, distinct options, and you just like are doing this and you're not doing that. And it's a little too like it's a little too regimentally discrete. It's what's actually going on in reality is like this continuous flow, and like I would describe it like you're washing down a river, you're flowing down the rapids, and you can paddle. you can paddle a little to the right and a little to the left, and you can discern that upcoming there will be a launch of the stream to the right, and you can paddle toward that and be launched that way or not. And you know, I'm being allegorical. You could easily sort of tie that into like, oh, it's just a choice, right, left. But like the point is, you're not at a standstill. You're not just like you're not working with like there's the good option and the bad option, and you do the good option over and over. You're good. What instead you're working with, you are caught within various unspeakable forces of necessity that are guiding the appearance and falling away of everything that exists around you and beyond you. And what goodness is just like this striking insight into the necessity of directing the process at play in a certain manner for it to be guided in a certain kind of development. That's what good is. And then evil is just like, I would actually say it's not to simply be like do the same thing except toward like an evil manner. I would say it's specifically like, in some sense, reacting against, like holding up, fettering the necessary process in some manner. So, you know, in a sense, this is swaying into ideology, like I'm getting into, because I'm obviously going to say like communism is the good thing. But I think this is the appropriate way to think of good and bad. It's about that, like, you know, it's like God has a plan. And God's plan is not a matter of like leaving it up to everyone to figure everything out with nothing else going on. It's that there are certain just things in place pointing certain processes in certain ways, and what there is to do is to like accelerate the tendency of the revelation of truth, or to deepen the illusion that stops people from being capable of that. That's kind of what good and evil really are. So, with all of that in mind, how do you like become good or become evil? And how can art do that? This is kind of the most complex question possible ever. So, the living formation of human character is the most complex possible process in the universe. And what I mean by this is not in any way possibly like chauvinistic. It's not like, you know, like if aliens show up, they're just human, whatever. I mean Geist. I mean Hegel's sort of ultimate dissection of human character as just being like embodied spirit itself. So if we meet aliens who have civilization, they're human in this sense, whatever. If we invent androids, they're human, whatever. I mean, Geist. So the development of like sentient, self-conscious character is the most possible, the most complex possible process ever. And and art, the communication of like unspeakable emotions, of feelings that form character. Art, more than anything, like very actively engages in the formation of character. And how art does this is the most complex process ever possible. So I am definitely not going to ultimately adequately simplify this. But I'll just say that basically it's some brutally psychoanalytic shit. Basically, like, what it means to be human, what it means to be Geist, what it means to be, like, sentient, self-conscious character, is you are, like, the world, the universe. You are all embodied into the most, like, the highest form it can become. And you contain just radically, just like spirally struggling, symbiotic and conflicting vast multitudes of partial kinds of character. So when art affects you, it doesn't like teach you some sort of lesson that becomes part of your like repertoire of like knowledge in a simplistic way, of just like available data and like kinds of algorithm building components or something. Like what it does to you is it like just fiddles with tiny little aspects of how it is you fundamentally perceive certain parts of reality. And that might mean parts of like external objective being, like the world beyond you, between you and everyone else, or it might mean like just aspects of you, of what's properly meant by the soul, like the psyche in total, like little bits of how you subconsciously, like habitually recall a particular essential component of your childhood, and how you interpret it in the formation of your interpretation of some new part of your life, or just like little partial components of how it is in particular you, like as taught some fundamental life lesson, generally like frame like wisdom itself with regard to some aspect of life, like exercise or like work or whatever. Like you have some sort of fundamental framing which can be just tweaked a little bit or pushed or pulled a little bit by how art gets to you. These are the ways that art affects you and everything else ever. But this kind of thing is going on. It's the most absolute complexity. So how does art make you become more good or more evil? So like I said, I believe like, there is good, there is evil. And what this is like, essentially, it's like good to evil is like the spectrum from like resonance to absolute repression, with the like ultimately necessary direction of the ultimate essence of the ultimate unity of being of the world. So if you're being good, if you are doing good, you are like enacting, enforcing this ultimate, like total universal worldly resonance. And if you're doing evil, you are enforcing illusion. You are creating the conditions wherein you and others are incapable of remaining in touch with this ultimate necessity, this unity. That's kind of what's going on. So then, if that's what good and evil are, and that's like how art can like make you good or evil, like what the fuck does that mean for Tolstoy's theory? Okay, so it's obviously not just like the hero is kind and he gets the girl, the end, woohoo, and that's good, and like shitty McShitterson rapes everyone, the end, that's bad. It does not work that way. Shitty McShitterson might actually be the good story. Because what matters is how it, as a work, which creates these resonances and like directs these partial aspects of you as this complex world in different ways, how the art like actively creates your soul in such a manner that you become more capable of being more in touch with the ultimate unity of being, and therefore become more capable of like grasping the essentially like ethical like moments and events. Like when it comes along, there's an ethical act to do. You do it without thinking, you know it because you are in touch. And you are in touch in this way, potentially, because some good art made you good. That's what good art can be. So, Tolstoy makes good art. But he does it because he puts you in touch in this way. So, Tolstoy makes good art in particular, and he himself did not theoretically, abstractly grasp this. Tolstoy makes good art in particular because he writes in such a radically flowing manner. He reveals like just the natural essence of motion of character and event in such an effortless, imminent manner. Like that's in particular kind of how he's beyond maybe anyone. He does this in such a way that you just feel so in tune with like the interconnection and the interpolation of social relations and historical events. Like he puts you in a humble state of mind because it becomes so natural to you to live alongside these agents who have their own like limited perspectives and make their own questionably ethical like life activities, but they do so in such a way alongside each other and within a structure he effectively conveys at scale, such that you develop your own sense very effectively for just history as its own character. He actually writes like the life process of Hegel's Geist very effectively, more than almost anyone. So Tolstoy was right. Art is just the communication of feelings, and good art is just like doing good in the world art. And bad art is doing evil in the world art. But Tolstoy did not have the proper like in-depth psychological frame with which to conclude from his theory of art, like what actually in practice is good art. So he was wrong about himself, as he was wrong that he made bad art. He made good art. And, you know, the strength of this theory is, like, of course you already fucking know Tolstoy made good art. And if you actually, like, got Tolstoy drunk and sat him down, of course he already fucking knew that he made good art. Who the fuck couldn't possibly ever, like, know Tolstoy made good art? You fucking read it, it's great. But this is why. This is the logos in place. This is the manner in which the world wherein Tolstoy makes good art is rational. So that's effectively my whole point for today. That's like, I think that's everything at core I wanted to get across. And you know, read What is Art, Tolstoy's What is Art. Again, it's like a whole book. It goes through a lot of shit, and genuinely he has like a deeper theoretical sort of like effort through like really analyzing aesthetics than like almost anyone. Like, he's trying very hard, and the sort of nonsense that comes out at the end of like Shakespeare is bad kind of throws people, and they can't possibly believe he's really doing good work. But there was just this, you know, there was one little thing missing. he needed a little extra work. And I think his theory of art is just right. What he was missing was like a theory of psychology which necessarily like aligns alongside his theory of art in such a way that like renders it ultimately correct. But like, that was not a failure of his theory. He just like lacked something such that his application went awry. So this is what art is, and that was what good is, and that's how art does good. And this is all pretty important, because like, if you have this sense of good and evil, and how people become good and evil, and how art affects you, and how art makes people good and evil, I mean, so art's pretty fucking important. Like, it's generally more important, I think, than like almost any, you know, more straightforward information communication. Like the war of art is like deeper than the war of raw fact, very much so. because facts are not truth. Facts are like isolatable, sort of like methodologically abstract, just closed off components of reality that are like truth. They're true procedurally, as a matter of like, we're setting a bunch of things in place as the case that you take it as an assumption, and then based on that, this is the truth of the matter. But even if it's like straightforwardly the truth of the matter, like a fact is a fact. A fact is only the truth in the sense that it conveys a component of discovering the truth proper, which the truth is the whole. The truth is the integration of all of the facts and the essence of discovery of being, which is not really like phrasable as fact. That is part of the truth. And what this means is that facts necessarily will always rely on interpretation to function as like in favor of the real truth. So interpretation is what makes facts conveyors of truth. And interpretation is psychologically imbibed. It's inescapably subjective. Even if you are the most like objectively sort of informed and sober persona with regard to a subject matter, that does not mean you are like exorcised of the subjectivity that informs your play with the facts. It just means you're like really fucking good at subjectively playing with facts. That's all you can ever do. That's what you have to aspire to. So yeah, the formation of the many like layered warring multitudes within you by all kinds of art affecting you at all levels, and very much beneath and between any parts of you that you yourself can be fully aware of. This is like going on. This is like what art does. And art makes people more good and more evil. This is going on. And yeah, no, that's important. So it makes like considering the art of our time like a serious matter. It's not that like ultimately it's more important to like figure out the canon than it is to like do good economics. Like there's there's a limit to it, but the point is just that like any kind of like methodological work to discover the truth, and any kind of work to apply perspective is fundamentally a matter of like psychologically primed activity, and an art is ultimately going to have like formed the psychological components of agency more really than any kind of just like simple, sober, objective like assessment of empirical whatever the fuck. Like really to be truly great at being truly objective, like to attain the ultimate kind of sobriety of analysis, what that really means is to like be more subjective than anyone else is capable of.